Yes. So this like your computer is still not working properly. So sorry. Would somebody can somebody else share this screen? It's posted in board docs. It's the audit status update document, so everybody can follow along.
In the meantime, while they're doing that, welcome to all the staff who are here today who aren't normally at the audit committee. So welcome, although they're not Kate. She's been a participant in another world. And there's Michelle, and then we have Parker and Jackson, who are the two student reps. Hey, Michelle, we're just getting started.
Okay, well,
Thank you. Sorry, I was on mute.
It's in board book, so if you guys want to open it on your own, you'll be able to see the attachment. I'll just start walking through it. So first, quick update on the ACH audit. The finance department has resumed processing new ACH payment applications as well as processing requests to make updates to current ACH payment information. So we are planning to complete the outstanding testing of just those two processes late in June. And I touched base with the finance department and they're good to go for us to come late in June. The P card audit, we have completed our field work. We placed wrapping up on the audit on hold to prioritize the health and safety checks audit. But we do anticipate with the health and safety checks audit wrapping up once school ends. There it is, yay. In mid-June, we'll resume wrapping up on that audit. The health and safety audit has been our priority right now. And so I have a memo to go over with you guys. So I'll skip that one and talk about it when I go over the memo. The next audit will be the hardship transfer audit. We're planning to get started on that in mid-July. And the student body activity funds audit, we'll get started on that probably in late September. A couple of other OIP activity updates. My performance evaluation is due soon. And so I just touched base with Director DePass. Hi, last week or yesterday, and we have a meeting scheduled for next week to get started on that, and then it will be circulated to the audit committee members for feedback. Also, the audit plan for the 21-22 school year is coming up due, and so I'll be reaching out to members of the board and also district leadership team over the course of the summer to solicit input on ideas for what we should start auditing in the fall. And then the last thing is on the PPS audit reports webpage, we have the status of the implementation of the recommendations to the SOS report posted. And the last time it was updated was December of 2020. And since I talked to Claire about this, and she said she's not going to be updating that scorecard anymore. So I was just wondering what the audit committee would like posted there as follow-up. And you guys can get back to me, but I just didn't want to forget about what your webpage looks like, and it needs a little bit of updating. So some direction would be helpful on that. That's all I got for a status update.
So I just had one thing, Janice, maybe on the audit, the Secretary of State's, just the update for the webpage. I would take whatever it is that we're going to, the questions that we received, and then our responses, they packaged up. And then when the auditors issue their final sort of report, we should just put that all together, and that should be sort of the complete package. It would be my suggestion.
Okay, I can do that.
Can I ask for clarification on that? Just because, I mean, are we talking about I guess I'm concerned about having something that's very digestible on our website, not like the document, but something that would be digestible for people, whether that's a status update, or I'm just trying to get clarification on what we're actually putting.
Yeah, Michelle, I think what probably will be the best sort of final piece of a multi-part effort will be the auditor's sort of final report, because they'll summarize all the data that we've submitted and then their own independent analysis. And that seems like that, coupled with the initial audit, the district response, should be sort of a complete package. We may not agree with everything that's in that final report, but I think there will be a tying off at that point, and it should be written in, I think, pretty, provide a summary of what they asked for and have sort of their analysis and conclusions.
Michelle, when
Okay.
we meet next week, I'll pull that page up for you and show you what it looks like, so you'll be able to tell whether or not it looks good.
That's great. I'm searching for it now as well.
Great. Next, I appreciate the update from the Office of the Internal Performance Auditors. And next, we're going to have an update on the health and safety checks that Janice and Mary Catherine have been conducting along with other teams. And I asked that Janice provide an update, because the purpose of these audits are not to, at the end of the time, say whether or not we were in compliance with our plans, but really to provide some sort of ongoing checking and feedback to the staff in the building, so that, and also to all of us, so that we have an understanding of sort of the status of the health and safety as we reopen our schools. And so this is an interim report, and once we have the presentation here, we'll have it posted and then circulate it to the rest of the board. But generally, it's I think good news that, and why don't, Janice, you share sort of your findings and so the methodology and what you found to date. And Dan, I would welcome any feedback or color commentary from your perspective on these. I know your team's been involved in them as well.
So I got my computer working now, and I'm trying to share my screen, but I don't see the share screen option. On the Zoom.
Really, you don't see a green button right in the center at the bottom?
No, I have a raise hand and a live transcript.
Is it possible for the host to check the settings?
It might be because Janice's other computer is still in the waiting room.
I love this troubleshooting real time.
Well, it's great to have a tech team on the line.
Okay, it's joining. Bear with me another second. Okay, it works. Okay, now I see the share screen. Okay, I am ready here. So sorry, guys.
For those students that are online, your parents really do miss you when you go to college. Your tech team moves out, and we notice.
So here is the memo. It's posted in board books for you guys. And I am just going to scroll down to the best part to start with here. So tour results in bold. As of May 7th of 2021, the Health and Safety Checks Audit Tours has not identified any non-compliance with building safety plans that would be considered significant. So I wanted to start with that because Julia beat me to the punch a little bit by saying it was great news, and this is outstanding news. This is fantastic. So I provided just a couple of examples of what non-significant items were identified during the tour, just to give you an idea of what we're seeing. So the first example is while air filtration units were present in each classroom and symptom space area, we noted 6 instances where the air filtration unit was not turned on. At our request, the air filtrations were immediately turned on, and the building staff stated they would be sure to turn it on each day moving forward. We also noted 1 instance where a nurse or SHA, a school health assistant, was not on site while students were participating in hybrid instruction. We noted the SHA was scheduled to be on site, however, they were sick and no backup was available to cover. So we talked about this with the central administration team, and they stated the SHAs are employees of Multnomah ESD, and they have been in communication with the MESD, who is working to fill those positions to support PPS needs. The other example I provided is we noted 2 instances where the max capacity for the classroom space was not listed. In both instances, we were able to confirm the max capacity for the classroom space was not exceeded. So just high level, we have been to 23 schools as of May 7th, and we have seen hundreds and hundreds of classroom spaces. So the idea that only 2 were missing a max capacity sign is amazing. I mean, the school buildings have really done a great job following through and being in compliance with their plan. So I also wanted to give you a little bit of background information, but I wanted to start with the great news. So in the memo, the background just talks about how the health and safety checks audit was approved by the Board of Education as part of the annual audit plan for this year. And the purpose of this memo is just to provide the results of what we've seen so far during our tours of both LIPI as well as hybrid completed as of May 7th. Audit process. The selection of schools for tours. So we prioritize the selection of Title I, TSI, and CSI schools for tours. We do anticipate we will be able to tour all schools that are Title I, TSI, and CSI, in addition to additional ones, but we will definitely, we have the capacity to get to all of those schools. Communication. So OIPA notified building administration via email that their schools have been selected for tours. Typically, the email is sent out on Wednesday or Thursday, stating the tour will take place the following week. The exact date and time of the tour was not provided. So it was a little bit of a surprise when we showed up, but they definitely knew we were coming. So that was good. At the end of the tours, OIPA offered a verbal debriefing to the school building administration to discuss all items of concern identified during the tours. This provided the school building administration with timely feedback and the opportunity to address any concerns immediately. So as some of the examples that I shared, you know, where the capacity sign wasn't listed, they were able just to print one and post it right away. Written results of the tours were emailed to the building administration along with the central office administration team timely, typically within 2 business days. Typically, we're doing our best to do it within 2 business days. OIPA is also participating in weekly status meetings with the central office administration team to discuss and address concerns identified during the tour. And I have another paragraph on that below, so I'll tell you more about that. At the request of the central administration team, if our tour identifies any items of concern that would be considered significant, they all gave me their cell phone numbers and we agreed to call them immediately to discuss any items that would be considered significant. But so far that hasn't been the case. So that's really great. Okay, so I started with that paragraph. I do want to draw one, I just want to say one recommendation here. And so we did note that the guidance provided to building administrators is not clear as to whether or not a window in classrooms and symptom spaces is required to be open to increase airflow. So as it's like an iterative recommendation, and you know, again, I'm working with district administration to clarify this guidance, but we do recommend the school district clarify guidance as to whether or not the window in the classroom and symptom space areas is required to be open to increase air circulation, and ensure updated guidance is circulated to building administrators as soon as possible. And after I wrote this, I think we have all agreed that for the classrooms, it's not required to be opened, and for the symptom space room, we're still talking about a little bit. Okay, so the attachment B is the hybrid tour checklist template that we used for the tours. It's long and it's very detailed. And if you guys are interested, I encourage you all to take a look at it to see what type of information we're looking for as we each building. Each building their plan is totally different from the other ones. So they're highly customized, and we audit to each school's individual building plan, which are different from each other. I also want to say some nice things about the district administration team, specifically Natasha and Juniper. They have just been so fantastic to work with. I know they have a lot of responsibilities, but every time I have a question or need a quick answer or run something by them, they have been so responsive, and I just really appreciate working with them. They're just great. So we also believe that the results of the tour completed this far, resulting in no significant non-compliance, demonstrates the school district's commitment to a safe reopening to schools. So follow up on tour results. So these are the weekly meetings that we participate with central administration team, where items identified during the tours are discussed and addressed. And at the request of the administration team, OIPA is also reviewing evidence that items identified during the tour has been addressed and resolved as the audit progresses. For example, if the building administrator takes a picture of the max capacity sign that has been posted for the classroom spaces where they were missing, we would consider that item to be resolved. So we are working with the administration team. Each week, we have a joint worksheet where we go through what's the evidence that we're looking for to consider these items resolved. So that's great. Due to the unique nature of this audit, we agree with the administration team that reviewing evidence that items identified in the tour have been resolved as the audit progresses is a better approach than waiting until all the audit tours have been completed. And due to the collaborative approach taken by the district administration team, we anticipate that all of the items identified in the tours will be resolved before the final audit report will even be issued. Any items that have not been resolved will be detailed in the final audit report along with recommendations. Okay, tours completed so far. As of May 7th, we had done 10 LIPI tours and 13 hybrid tours. We are on track to tour an additional 21 buildings, providing hybrid instruction, and that represents in total about 45% of all PPS buildings. So we're very busy getting to meet all of the school administrators. It's just so fantastic. So attachment A is a list of all the buildings we have toured so far, separately listed the Lippy ones and then the hybrid ones. And then down here, this is the checklist I mentioned. It's all here. And just so you can get an idea, like for example, here at the building entry, it's like the buildings are required to diligently screen all students and staff for symptoms on entry. But every single building has a totally different entry plan. So some places will have 3 entry points, some will have 5. So each plan is totally customized to their building. And we update our audit procedures specifically to whatever their plan sets. The template doesn't include any specific building content, but you can see right here below, this is where each building would enter in their building specific information that we would audit to. Okay, I think that's everything I have. Are there any questions?
Also, I'd like to give Dan, if you have anything, just since your team was involved in this, if anything, you have anything you want to add before we jump into questions, if there are any?
I think, thank you. Good evening, everyone. Dan Young here. I just want to, I think, appreciate Janice and Mary Catherine. I think, you know, one of the reasons that the audits went so well is because of their really incredibly objective and thorough approach. They developed a really great audit plan from the beginning, which is what allowed them to go to so many schools in such a short amount of time. So they were exceptional communicators and collaborators. I think the weekly meetings were very, very effective. Appreciate the call out to both Natasha and Juniper, because I know they worked very hard, and anything that came up, they looked to resolve very quickly. And I did not receive any phone calls from Janice, so that made me feel good. So really great job, Janice and Mary Catherine.
Great, thanks, Dan. We appreciate getting a snapshot, as I'm sure a lot of parents and staff who are sending their kids into schools appreciate that. Director DePass.
Yeah, I want to jump on the appreciation bandwagon. It's not only, you know, Mary, Catherine, and Janice who did an amazing job, but the entire school central office staff that had something to do with the logistics of putting air filtration in place, removing furniture, identifying symptom rooms, communicating to building administrators, like all of that went well for this to happen, for the end result to end up with an audit that's really this clean. So I just want to thank everyone. I can't name everybody, but or remember everyone, but thank the staff that had involvement with the success of this this spot audit, I call it. I only had one question, and that was about a clarification about the windows. If we find out that the symptom spaces need ventilation, will that require some of those rooms, a shift in some of those rooms? And then a bigger question is, do we know, we might not, and I don't want to add more staff, more time or attention, but do we know which buildings have operable windows and which ones we don't? And if we don't know, is there some inventory or something happening at some point?
You want me to answer that, Janice?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay.
So much for being here.
I'll double check. I believe there is draft guidance that's going to go out about the windows, and I believe what it says, it's not required for them to be open. It is beneficial for them to be open if that is appropriate in that situation. But I'll double check that and make sure that everyone on the committee sees that as well. I want to make sure I'm not saying anything incorrect. And as far as we don't have a building by building inventory of the windows. What we do have is our work order system identifies when there is a work order for windows, and those are considered a high priority. And so I know I looked at the data quite a while ago about windows, but that was one of the highest priority work orders. So when those come in, those will be addressed right away.
So after I wrote this report, I do know that Juniper and Natasha did have the opportunity to go to the safety committee and chat about the windows. So I know it's being worked on, the concept of whether or not they're required and everything. So, you know, one of the issues with issuing an interim report means that everything is not always resolved at the time. And there's still a few outstanding questions, but I didn't want to like not put that recommendation in there because it was something that I felt needed to be addressed sooner rather than later. And they are definitely working on it, and I'm confident that guidance will be sent out ASAP.
Great, and that's the type of thing that you can't just fix overnight or just like flip the switch. So great to have that just in progress so that when we get to our full reopening, everybody's clear on what the guidance is. Director DeMass, did you have anything else, or is that?
No, that was it. And thank you, Dan, for providing that feedback about the outcome of this and the quality that was put into this audit, the scope.
Jackson and Parker, did you have anything related to this?
Yes, I had one, well, sort of two quick things. One was, again, just, appreciating Janice and Mary Catherine. I've been getting regular updates about this audit. I know it's a ton of work, and they've been very thorough. And then also some appreciation for the building level staff. Obviously our schools weren't built with symptom room facilities, so getting that all set up is remarkable. And then Janice, I had a question that was just sort of to gauge, I guess, where things are at. Are there any current outstanding, the word isn't findings, the word's escaping me what I'm looking for, but outstanding.
We're calling them concerns at
Concerns.
this point. Just because the word finding means something.
Yes.
That's concerns until we're concluded. Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Any outstanding concerns?
So on the shared worksheet, there are some that have not yet been resolved, but we are working on them, and nothing that would make me want to bring that to anybody's attention. So far so good. And also, so thanks for saying thanks to me, but I also want to say thanks to you and Parker, Parker and Jackson, because they have met with me every week, and I go over the results of what we're seeing at each school with them. And I really respect their feedback, getting that student input, because this is really affecting them. And so just the idea that they let me run and brainstorm all of these ideas, and one of the things that I try to do is ask them how they feel about the level of significance of some of the items that we identify as we go, and I try to help let what they say guide me as to whether or not something is significant. So I really appreciate that student input.
Jackson, do you have anything? All right. Well, thank you, Jackson and Parker, for injecting a student perspective into the process. It's super, super important. And I'm sure that the schools have benefited. So just in terms of this audit, when at the next meeting and where we have committee reports, I'll share just a really short, brief overview of this as an interim report, make the memo available to everyone, we'll post at the meeting. And then Roseanne, if at the just thinking to the future at the end of the school year, when these audits are completed and there's a final report, I think we should ask to have a just short presentation by Janice of the final audit report, given it was on the board work plan.
Yes.
But for this one, this is just an interim, and we can provide the status update and the good news.
Yes.
I'm not sure people need to listen beyond the, and we didn't find any material findings, which is great.
I will just want, as a scheduling note, I will be out of the office for 4 weeks. And so that presentation could potentially be done by Mary Catherine. If not, it would need to be the first part of August.
Okay, we'll work with you on how best to do that. But I do think it would be good to have it reported, because I know there'll be a lot of concerns about the fall, just especially for families that are in CDL right now that want to hear, sort of like, what did you find? And then also families who have students in buildings right now. So we'll make sure before.
Everywhere, everybody needs to know how great the school district's doing right now.
Good. Well, we like those reports. Okay. I'm going to do two things, just so that we know what time we have to work with. Rosanna or Kara, do we have any public comment?
No.
Okay, so I'm going to cross that item off. And then there's one other item besides the Secretary of State response, which is the bond performance audit results. And there was a sort of internal discussion about having a joint school improvement bond committee, audit committee, and the bond accountability committee have a joint meeting regarding the audit results from the bond performance audit. And the summary is that will be this spring, but that would be early in the fall. Is that correct, Dan?
Yeah, that's correct. We're expecting the initial draft towards the end of June, and then there will be a few rounds of review before the final is ready for presentations, probably August, maybe even in September.
Great. So last year we did it separately, and we talked about trying to do it all together. So we have all the parties who either have a perspective of the bond or perspective of the audit, from audit perspective, participate at one time. And so we can all get the value of and the benefit from everybody's questions. Dan, just one question. So that's, that's about the sort of annual results. Are we still getting posted the sort of quarterly reports? I know they're going to BAC, but.
Correct. So at the BAC meetings, we do updates, and those updates on each finding, and then those do also go to the board as well, and they're on our website.
Okay, great. Any questions about that agenda item? So that'll be a next fall item. So the last remaining and the largest item for today's audit committee meeting relates to the Secretary of State's audit. And for just as history, in January of 2019, the Secretary of State Audits Division produced a report. It was on both Portland Public Schools and the Oregon Department of Education. They had a number of findings and recommendations. The district had a very lengthy response and has been regularly providing updates and responses. Our work was really divided. The PPS portion of the audit was divided into two sections. One, the vast majority of it was around staff-related work. And then there was one section, for some reason, the way it got set up was number 26, but there was A through F. So it was a multi-part number. And so throughout this process, we have been, the staff has been providing quarterly updates, and then the board provided and had a discussion and sent their update at the end in December of last year. Subsequently, the The auditors have, this is one that nobody wants to come in midway through because we're almost done, but there's lots of pieces to it. The auditors have come back. They traditionally do a review about the implementation and then issue a final report. It's not a re-audit, but it is a comprehensive sort of final review. So they came back in. We provided the information to them, and then they submitted a series of questions about the data that was and the information that was presented. And today there's two pieces of information. There's several documents in the public docket. There is the staff response, which it's in a big spreadsheet. And we also have, I don't know, Kara or Roseanne, could you read the name of the two documents that are there's the one Whitehurst and then the second document, just for the record, of the staff response? Do you have that?
Yes. I think the document is, sorry, I have my book closed. Follow-up questions for PPS.
Okay. So it's a big spreadsheet, and that is all the staff responses to the staff questions. And given that this is the board audit committee, we are not going to review unless there's something in particular that somebody has a question that maybe we can put the question on the table and get it answered later. But really that's staff's perspective, not really the board's work or the audit committee's work to alter the responses from staff. And then there's the other piece, which is the board piece, which we're going to go to next. But before we go to that, is there any questions or comments on the document whose name Roseanne just read, or the Whitehurst report?
My only comments are the links that are attached aren't clickable through Boardbook or the PDF version, so I'll just submit some questions around getting links to those.
Yeah, thanks for raising that, Jackson. In fact, Megan, I had that same question, and Megan, I believe, sent me a PDF version of yeah, Roseanne, if I send this to you.
It actually has been updated as of like the start of the meeting. So
Okay.
they should be clickable now, Jackson.
Okay, great. That was my only thing. And then also just for, I think, what was it? Recommendation 5, I just look forward to seeing the performance measures by department in the final budget.
Great. I would ask that, Kara, if you could just include those two questions in the minutes, it would be great. Well, one we have an answer to, but the second question that Jackson had, that's a great call out. Anything else? Okay, so the second piece and the most substantive piece is the board, the response to the follow-up questions to the board. And based on the December meeting, where there was an expressed desire by the board to have the audit committee make recommendations and respond, what I did is I went through the document and asked a series of follow-up questions. Staff has provided some documentation and then made a recommendation. Some there is no action needed because the sense that we've answered the questions, and then there's a couple of the questions where there's still some information that's needed. And I was going to try and, if you give me a minute, did I drop out? Am I only in here once? No, I'm in here twice. I'm in here twice. I'm going to try and share my screen. We'll see how good I can do that.
And if I don't have access to some of the links, which I don't, should I just request access to them?
The
Are you
links,
able to click on the links in board book?
I'm able to click on them, but some of them I don't have access to.
what do you mean?
Like it says request or access denied.
So,
Can
is
you
that,
let us know which ones they are, Jackson? Maybe you can send an email to me and we will follow up.
are
Yep,
those the
sounds good.
ones that were referencing the executive session?
No, the ones in the staff response that was posted to board book, some of those links are
Oh,
don't allow access. They're not public.
okay. So one thing, and Rosanna, I don't know if this is Kate, that all of the links that we provide to the Secretary of State need to be public facing documents. So if they are documents that access is being denied because they have confidential information, then we need to remove whatever is confidential information and be able to provide responses that are public facing. Or it may just be that they, for some reason, are not public face, not access is being denied, but there's no particular reason, in which case we should just make sure that's fixed. But all of our documents should be easily recommended or easy to anybody in the public to see how we responded. So this is where we get into a little bit of the, I thought the easiest way to approach this would just be to go through each section. And I know that Jackson and Parker, sorry you didn't have it earlier. I know Michelle's, won't be new to Michelle, the vast majority of it. But basically how it's set up is the start of the section is basically all the links to the audit, the district response, the Secretary of State's auditor's response back. And then we're basically we created a document in which all of the Secretary of State's questions about the board, number 26, about the board response, are in this document. And just so that everybody can follow along, there's a color code so the black text is the Secretary of State's, the auditor's questions for us. The red is my initial comment about the questions. Sometimes it was asking staff for information, or if I had the information, I just dropped it in or provided commentary. And then staff went through, provided links, responses, and those are all in green. And then the purple text is my reflections on the whatever staff had provided, and also recommendations to the audit committee. And this is to be sort of an iterative process. So I think the easiest way to sort of run through these is at a high level. So just summarize each one, and then Jackson, you've already identified that you had some additions to my recommendations, so I'm open to that. And Michelle and Parker, I appreciate it. If you think the recommendation misses the mark, or that we're missing information, that we should add something else, please let me know. And if you're in agreement, we'll leave it as the sort of audit committee, sort of the status of the audit committee's, this is our sort of collective response. So the first topic, what relates to and I am going to try and move us through this. So if we start getting hung up in something, and I'm going to move us on, and we can come back to it at the end, but I want to make sure that we move through most of these. I think it's pretty straightforward, and I really appreciate staff taking the time to, when we had questions about information, to get it back. So the first question related to GVC, and the auditor wanted to know, what's been implemented, what's under development, and what is set for future development. And we have had presentations over the last year on some portions of the GVC, and it is listed here. And then they also ask specifically about language arts, math, health science has been completed. What we have here on the screen in the green is some very specific points in time in which staff provided an overview to the board, and we had a board discussion about portions of the GVC. Most often in
Julia.
Yep.
GVC stands for Guaranteed Viable Curriculum.
Correct. I'm sorry. That's a
Okay.
great call out. Sorry with the.
Well, it's
yeah.
That's all right.
And so we have some very specific places where we had sort of new curriculum, or some that the board in particular had been interested in that had been presented. I know for me personally, a lot of those were learning opportunities. However, it's not a broad overview. And again, we have limited time on our board agendas. And I do think that the curriculum elements that were presented to us were ones in which, again, either something was being developed, it was new, or the board had requested a specific feedback or a specific presentation on a piece of it. And so, and the other question they'd ask is whether the district had been tracking feedback, and in the response back from staff, there wasn't any evidence that the district was tracking feedback. So the recommendation, a series of recommendations, and Dr. Valentino, I welcome sort of your comments as well, not just the audit committee's, that the staff provide the board with a comprehensive written report just outlining the status of all subject, all grades in terms of development and implementation, and any data and feedback on the GVC. Again, we have where the development of some components were presented to the board, but the specific recommendation was the board's awareness of the implementation of sort of all subjects, all grades, and what sort of tracking had done. And maybe before any committee members ask questions or make suggestions, we ask Dr. Valentino if he has any comments or
So thank you. Yeah, thank you, Director Brim Edwards. And hello again, everyone. So when you think about the GVC, you think about it in three areas. One is standards-based, a scope and a sequence, units of study and lessons that are actually applied in a classroom. The second part of that is the professional development that goes with it, so the teachers can actually teach applying those strategies. And the third one is that we have the curriculum available for them. So as we've gone through these past 3 years, the first phase was just to standardize instruction across the district. So we had, over time, been presenting to the board as we were developing the content areas. Language arts, math, and science were the first three that go back 3 years. And then we were developing the units and the lessons. That was sequential, so that happened the second year. And with that were agreements on what are the practices that we're going to use in the classroom that required professional development of teachers and site administrators. So our interest was to report on all of that as it was happening. But the fact of the matter is, as Director Brim Edwards says, there are only limited time that you have. So we try to sample hoping that as we sampled math and language arts, it would be understood that across all disciplines, the attempt would be to approach it in a very similar and comprehensive way. And so when in our own response here to the asks by the state, it was really about being able to capture the phases as well as understanding that the last phase is really the curriculum adoption that barely got started a couple of months ago. And so once we put that piece in place, all of those three elements that I shared with you would work together as we continue building and evolving. Part of that then becomes the feedback loop that we really were not really comprehensive in building a formalized feedback loop about how teachers were doing with the implementation, how principals were doing with leading the work, and that is something that we're gonna have to formalize and incorporate into every subject area pre-K-12 because our work is pre-K-12 across all disciplines. So you can imagine how big that is. And so feedback loops across all of those will need to be formalized. And we're working with Russ's department to begin to think about how do we create a framework just to evaluate our progress, not the progress of the students or the teachers, our progress in rolling out our GVC.
So thank you. Let me see if I can summarize what the status based on what you said is that we've standardized curriculum. There's units, there's scope and sequence, and that's completely done. But the actual materials adoption is just starting, and the feedback loops haven't yet been developed. Oops, you're on mute.
Apologies. There are some feedback loops in place. They just haven't been formalized in a comprehensive way. So we're understanding about math because now we have programming that we can actually apply the curriculum as well as the strategies that now align. We have preliminary feedback loops around that, right, from our teachers. We're now looking at science to create the feedback loop around that. But what we want to be able to do is to have just a system for evaluating every aspect of our instructional work so that it is comprehensive, but more importantly, that it's integrated and not spotty, which is what we have right now.
Yeah, so I think what would be helpful to me, and I'll ask other board members, but instead of a long report, just a grid that has the grades and the content area with the like a yellow, red, or green, or green, yellow, red, so that we would see both of like whether the curriculum exists, whether the adoptions have happened, and whether the feedback loops are in place. And by asking for that, the expectation is not that, say, you have a whole sheet that like a chart that is all green, but that we can see where we are on in each of those areas. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I was actually taking notes. So yes, no, it does, because not only will it facilitate it for you as a board when you have questions, but for the general public as well to actually see very clearly the progression of how that works. Yes.
Yeah, and I don't think there's a wrong answer, but from the board's perspective is just we need to be able to see where we are. So where do we have formalized feedback loops? You know, where do we still need curriculum to be adopted and implemented? But just again, a very simple, I don't want to say dashboard, even just like green, yellow, red, where things are, so that we have that and can track that. I think the areas where we need to take a deeper dive, it's there. Michelle, Jackson, Parker.
I don't have anything to add, but I think it's a good idea. I like the idea of having a visual presentation, just a snapshot of where we are, whether something has been implemented, if it's in progress, or if there's still work to do. I'd find that also very helpful. Somebody mentioned maybe Valentino, a graph. So yeah, I don't think it needs to be a long report, but it would be very helpful to have some type of a representation so we can see where we're at.
So I will be modifying, not the comprehensive written, because this isn't an exercise of staff creating a lot of new material. More, here's just a snapshot of where we are. Parker and Jackson?
I guess just one little thing, and this might have been touched on. I think, Luis, you mentioned working with Dr. Russell's department around tracking implementation. Is that in the form of sort of performance measures, or is that just like a data tracking system? I was wondering just if you could talk more about that.
Right, because in this particular phase, we're looking at our own implementation. So key performance indicators would be the first step, which would be identifying what are the objectives in this aspect of the work in our delivery of curriculum adoption. And so as indicators, what are the things we're hoping to accomplish? And to say in math, it's fully adopted and implemented. In science, it's fully. So what would tell you, right? As Director Brim Edwards indicated, what would tell you on a scale the degree to which we've accomplished that? So in project management, you can actually phase it and say, in 1 to 5, where are you on that scale? 5 fully implemented, 1 being not yet. So where are we in that, right? And so, or in progress, completed, that sort of thing. So what we want to be able to do is create like a dashboard that has those markers that will tell you as a committee member, where are we in the full implementation of whatever the objective is inside of a set of goals. And so that's how it would play out. For students, obviously it's performance data, but we're not looking at that. We're actually looking at just our performance indicators and the implementation of our guaranteed and viable curriculum.
Okay, and then I guess once you get that system more set up with Russ, I'd be interested in hearing a little more about it, but that's down the road, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, that's work over the summer. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I have I'm wondering if you set that up similar to a Gantt chart. So where on your x-axis you had either milestones or dates of completion or status of completion, and your y-axis would include the subject matter by grade or something. And that way it could be updated. It could be dynamic rather than a static document in Word, for instance. It's a little bit harder to update.
Yes, okay, definitely. And so it would be good to sort of share back more concrete actions and what it could look like with this committee and then with the board as well, so that we can all come to agreement on what that could look like, because then that'll help move it faster.
Yes, we can do that, Dr. Valentino. I say this isn't meant to be an exercise that takes staff a significant amount of time. I'm sure you know probably in your head like where we are in most of these content areas by grade level, and I think we could capture something pretty quick that is a useful document for the board, but not time consuming for staff. I want to keep us moving.
I had one thing.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make sure that it was public, like once we have this together. I know Julie already mentioned, Director Brim Edwards already mentioned that. So just making sure that happens. And then I'll follow up later, but just I wanted to know more about what the feedback loops are looking like.
Great. Thank you, Jackson. The next item is around the comprehensive assessment system referred to in our response. And
Director Brim Edwards, Danny Ledesma is here to answer some questions on contracts, and there's an overlapping meeting. Would it be possible to, I know that you're trying to go in a certain order, but to address the portions that she may be able to answer some questions while she's here?
Yeah, Sorry, I'm a very linear person.
Thank you. I appreciate
Um,
that.
yeah.
I think it's F, Director Bram Edwards.
Yeah, so by what page is that?
I think you're on E, so a little bit further down. Oh,
Okay.
right here.
Okay. So this was a question about, so is there, just, I want to use it, given how much we've got to go through, I want to just make sure that, because we have a lot of information here from Emily Courtnage. I want to make sure, Danny, that whatever information specifically you want to speak to, you should speak to that. And I don't know if it's number 3 where your name is, or somewhere else, but we can go ahead and take that right now, and then we can go back in the rest of the order. And we don't have to go through all the contract information, just the portion that you want to speak to.
Sure. I just wanted it to be really clear that in addition to myself, the contract manager, the folks on my team, the superintendent, the chief of systems performance, our program evaluation manager, and many team members on that team all review contractor performance. We require contractors to turn in quarterly reports, and we've included that requirement throughout the pandemic, which is really outside of what everyone else is doing. Multnomah County has not required the same level of reporting, and other private funders have not required that same level of reporting. So we've really kept our oversight consistent, even though we're in the middle of a pandemic. We share our contractor performance at our quarterly convenings, where the superintendent convenes all of our contractor partners, all of the superintendent's leadership team, and the principals of the schools. We have a data review portion of each of those meetings where we look at the contractors' information in aggregate, as well as share themes that are coming out. We also have a more brief conversation in small groups where folks are talking about what's working, what's not working in terms of qualitative data and ways that we can kind of have that continuous improvement. We also publish all of our results. So starting with the second quarter, you can go to our website under the partnerships page, and we have each of our strategies outlined. We have the amount of investment as well as the contractor by contractor performance in each of the strategy areas. And so I wanted to make sure that folks were understanding that. In terms of
can I just interrupt for a moment? I think what we're going to try and do is capture what you just said and drop it in here along with the link, because I think that's super responsive to what we want to put in here. So thank you.
And then I would say that this year's funding allocation was allocated not only through an RFP process, but the RFP was based on a comprehensive review, something short of an evaluation, but a redesign where we outlined a RESJ investment strategy document. That strategy document outlined the 5 strategies that we'd invest in. It described the best practice in terms of a literature review that was done. And our reporting is tied to the literature and the fidelity to those strategies that are outlined in the investment strategy. And I don't think you have anything like that throughout the rest of the district. In a memo that we shared on October 5th, we outlined all of our performance metrics. We also have shared both our report template in terms of the quantitative data that we require, as well as the qualitative data, where we're asking our partners to reflect on that. And that is not only reviewed by myself, as I said, but we do that in partnership with the Office of Systems Performance, Dr. Christine Pitts and Dr. Russ Brown, as well as their team members, all review these things. They've also set up meetings with their contractors in between reporting, where we're going through, we're asking questions, we're getting a better understanding of how they collect the data, making sure that we have common definitions and common norms for reporting. I would say that performance is just one piece of evaluation tool for renewal, and certainly this year is an unusual year, and so I don't think that we would look at performance. We would want to set any type of baseline for performance in this year because of virtual practices. Our partners have been extremely creative and innovative in providing this level of performance in a pandemic. However, it's been something that's been much more improvisational as opposed to tied to best practice in terms of virtual service provision. It's something our community-wide that we've been learning, but we have been working in really close partnership with Multnomah County, who issued a report on how to, they worked with NW, Ed Northwest. Ed Northwest, that's right, to look at what our best practices virtually, and our partners have been sort of aligning to that. But so performance is one indicator. We are in conversation with our partners, with the Coalition of Communities of Color and looking across programs across the state and across the country to see how we can have a larger evaluation framework. The plan, best laid plans were to sort of start that and baseline this year, but of course we can't because of the unusualness of the year. So we are not going to set baseline for performance metrics for this year. We'll sort of use the first full year of in-person service to be able to set that baseline to then be able to develop a stronger evaluation framework. I will say that in conversations with my colleagues across the country, they have said that they haven't seen any type of rigorous evaluation or rigorous reporting in the way that we do. In conversations with evaluators from the state, ODE, they have said that they haven't seen anything like this in the state in terms of our oversight and the performance that has happened in the redesign. And I would say that in talking to folks who question our investment in culturally specific providers and Black-led organizations and Latino-led organizations and organizations led by people of color who are partnering with us, there was a lot of questions around the level of scrutiny that these organizations are getting, despite the fact that we're very proactive in publishing their results. And there hasn't been the same level of scrutiny with other types of organizations, with private entities that we contract with for similar services. This is really unlike anything else. And so I'd say that we're in terms of these sets of questions, I feel like they've been asked and answered. We've been working on this very diligently. Our partners have been working on this really diligently, and we're completely showing lots of daylight in ways that they're working with us and seeing lots of results, and tied to a framework that is, that has been sort of research driven as well.
We really appreciate you coming here and sharing this, and we hopefully this will be the last set of answers to the Secretary of State's audit, so that once we submit this, we can, I think, share the work and the information you just provided, which hopefully will answer the Secretary of State's questions that they raised from 2019. I would ask Roseanne, could you get from Danny get that so that we can include the link of the October 5th, 2020 outline of the performance metrics, so that we can add this in? Because I think with that and the other information that Danny provided and that Emily provided, we should have a comprehensive response.
Yes.
I want to, before we move on, acknowledge what Danny said and something that was buried in what in her response. Thank you, Danny, if you're still on the call. And that is the level of scrutiny that efforts that are led by communities of color and organizations headed by or led by people of color, the level of scrutiny, and it's something that might be buried in all of our work, but I know this to be true. And so, Danny, I appreciate you bringing that up. I know this is true. Organizations that serve communities of color have additional scrutiny on them and stick out like a sore thumb in Oregon. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
So maybe in our response,
in fact, we give a lot of airtime to racial equity and social justice, and our work, our ResJ work is embedded in how we show up and the work that we do. And this little one piece is where we can show up a little bit differently if we are in fact supportive of racial equity and social justice work in our city, in our district, in our state. We can show up differently this way, and we can push back on the level of scrutiny that this in this particular area.
Let's, as we incorporate our feedback to the Secretary of State's office, let's incorporate that theme and message in our communication back. Does that work? Anything else, Jackson or Parker, before Danny dashes off to her next meeting? Okay, thank you, Danny. I really appreciate that. And hopefully we'll be able to faithfully capture all that information you provided. I'm going to go back to and Roseanne or Kara, if at all possible, to somehow, I took notes, but I'm not sure I got it all. If we can capture that to be able to include this in the meeting. We're going to have to move pretty quickly because I'm just looking at the time here.
So Julia, I don't know if it would be helpful or not, but I was able to get through A, B, and C with Director DePass as well as Jackson and Parker. So if you want
so let me ask the will of the committee. Can we go through that, or do you want to go through it as a group?
Maybe if we just go through the recommendations, because I do have a couple other comments.
Okay. Okay, so on number 2. Sorry, this is just a dense document. So I'm sorry, what number did you say, Jackson?
Where we left off is up just one more. We were talking about that comprehensive.
Yeah.
Right there.
So the district doesn't, the response does not provide the comprehensive assessment system that was referenced. So the recommendation is that we get a response. If there isn't one, that's a response, but it does say in the initial staff response that there will be one on page 24. Any comments on that one, or should I move on to the next recommendation? Okay, and I think we should just be clear. These are not questions that we came up with, rather they're questions that the Secretary of State asked us, and so these are our responses to them. Okay, this is a question about climate, and the district response was around the panorama, and which does a district-wide building by building climate survey. And this speaks to more the recommendation of making visible what board members would have access to, and how that's done, so that the broader community has visibility to the feedback loops from principals on building and district climate, and how that access would be made available again to the broader community. And if it is available, Roseanne, I don't know who this is from a staff level, but if it is already available some way to the broader public, we should just note that. And I think we don't need a lot of further action, but as far as I know, you can only access it if you've had training and you have the access password.
So I think I might have mentioned this, that there will be a public-facing dashboard of some sort for families at the end of May or beginning of June. It won't be the raw data, but it will be results that families can see. And that will be posted on our website.
And one other thing I just wanted to mention is that the CBRC requested that it be given to them earlier so they can help guide their discussion with the budget with this qualitative data as well.
Is there an issue, Roseanne, with them getting access?
I would need to talk to Brenda Martinick to find out how that would work, but my guess is there would be some sort of training first required, like we have been required, like we're requiring board members also to be trained.
Yeah, I was going to say I haven't had my training.
Yeah, I think, sorry, the concern was also that it was being presented in June when we are submitting our recommendation in early May. So just like pushing it forward a month would be helpful.
And that's a good point, Jackson. I'm not quite sure how or why the timing is the way it's landing, but I'll definitely find out if that's a possibility or how the CBRC could utilize some of that feedback.
Yeah, and then I just had a question for Director DePass or Director Brim Edwards. In B1, it says that they'll be scheduling an opportunity for a small group introduction in late May. We're in late May. Have you guys been asked for small groups yet?
We have. Mine was supposed to be today or yesterday or last week. We're still planning it. I don't know about Michelle.
I have attended a training as of last week, I believe. But I hear your point about the order of operations here. It would be very helpful to have had this in April, so to feather into the budget process.
Okay, so moving on to, this is a question around the original audit had a lot of information about principal and teacher turnover, especially in high poverty schools. Have we received data? There was a link in the PDF that I couldn't open, so there may be data there, but to date I haven't seen any data. So I had just done as like sample chart of what chart could look like that would give us very clear data on both level of tenure and retention in our high poverty schools, along with average teacher experience, which is a data point that's available. And if the information is provided in the staff document, which I couldn't open, we may not need this, but otherwise we haven't received any data that I'm aware of that's very specific to the high poverty schools.
Yeah, my one request was just to have it expanded to all schools, just because I want to see if it's a trend across all schools, not just high poverty schools. And then also, I think in the question it references low teacher experience. I was wondering if we could include teachers in this matrix as well instead of just administrators.
So that's what the far right column is. So that data is already reported, I think, on the school report cards, the average years of experience of teachers in the school. So that's an easy drop in. One of the things I will say, Jackson, is that for right now, I think we have to focus on what we were asked. And I think it's a great question, and a question that I think I'll be interested to see whether that's something in the superintendent's strategic plan about sort of retention at all schools, because leadership sort of sustained leadership across, at schools across the district is really important. I think for this particular piece, I want to answer the question that they ask, if that's Okay, but let's hold on to your question, and maybe Roseanne, you can let us know if that's something that's contemplated in the strategic plan. And then the second piece of it, the initial audit had a whole section on what they call it, initiative overload, and so it's not clear what initiatives have been reduced or eliminated. So some sort of report, but report probably sounds more substantive than probably is needed versus just a list. Are people okay with that? Okay. Okay, the next point in time, there was supposed to be this is around some of our struggling schools. The district response was that there was an executive session on May 11th and then a bargaining session. And again, sort of in the spirit of being able to provide documentation of what's actually happened, we can't really use what's in an executive session because that's obviously not a public facing document, or there's no public facing materials.
So Director Burma Edwards, the PowerPoint that was attached was shared in the bargaining session with PAT that was live streamed. So it can be used since it has been made public.
Great, thank you, Roseanne. So I'm just going to note that staff has posted. And so probably the one piece is, I know what in that presentation is that would be a maximum of 8 schools. And the question is sort of scope. And so say that is something we get in bargaining, that's sort of the timing and sequence that that tool would be used. And so I can take out does that work for everybody?
And that link right there is the link to that presentation. And since Roseanne says it's public, then that link works.
Yeah, the only thing is it describes what a zone school is. It doesn't actually describe how like the scope and the sequence, and that you'd be able to get all of them. So just one more click down. Okay, the audit action plan, was the board briefed on it? This is, I think, a pretty easy one. Yes, we were briefed on it. We co-created this with the staff team, and it's been posted and utilized, and it was shared actually with the Secretary of State. So good partnership with staff on that. Okay, so the question here was about on this one was about potential savings area in the budget and benchmarking. And while that hasn't been presented to the board, so are requesting staff to provide the board with a written analysis for potential savings in the 21-22 budget. And it appears that if you look at the staff report, that they've done the work, the board just hasn't seen it. So when I look at the staff report, it's included in that, but it's just not in the It hasn't been provided to the board. And then another recommendation that the benchmarking reports be presented to the board with the budget as a tool to make comparisons across the districts. So the one time we've had at least benchmarking presented to the board, it appears that from the staff report that there is benchmarking happening. It's just not being presented to the board with the budget. And that so the recommendation is to present that at the same time as we get the budget presentation so that we can actually use that as a tool during the budgeting process. Anything on that? I'm going to take it, people, that you take your mic off if you've got something to add and just jump right in. Otherwise, I'm going to keep moving, but please interrupt me. Okay, the student conduct and discipline.
One thing.
Oh.
Sorry, the staff report, the link does not work. The draft student conduct and discipline policy staff report does not work.
Okay. I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be directing these comments to. Is it Rosanna or is it Kate or somebody else?
I'm writing them down.
Yeah,
Okay.
we'll note it and fix it.
Okay.
And then, sorry, one other thing. And I think it was number 1, it says the link about student discipline and behavior. We haven't reported publicly 2019-20 or 2020-2021 data on this for the reason of we're in a pandemic, so it wouldn't be comparable to past years. I feel like, yeah, of course it won't be comparable, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be reporting that data. So I'm wondering if we have that data and we're just not reporting it, or we're not even collecting it.
So Jackson, will you write that question and send it to Rosanna and I, and we will get an answer.
All right, sounds good.
Great. So we actually have done a fair amount until the pandemic. The policy committee had done a lot of work with a ton of community engagement with parents and staff around, central office staff around the student conduct and discipline policy. We have a draft. The data annually is uploaded in the website. The one thing here that there is a question about the behavior collaboration team, and the staff response said that it's no longer meeting and it's being replaced by a reimagine discipline team, I think what it is. So the recommendation is the staff share, like whether that team, because they said they were going to inform the board whether that team met, you know, and when it met and what was learned, and as well as what is it's been replaced with. Any changes to that? Okay. So this next one is about tracking information and analysis of teacher and principal issues with student discipline practices. And we don't see that the board has been, and it may be occurring, but we don't see that the board has been supplied with the tracking information. So this is a request for staff to provide that to the board. Any issues? Okay. So this next one is the board committee discussed and been briefed on student discipline data, expulsions and suspensions, and discussed it. The recommendation is the board should schedule a discussion once the staff has provided the board with the tracking information and the analysis. So my guess is that would be later in the summer, next fall. Any issues with that recommendation?
My only recommendation for this is, again, flagging it as something that would be important to have diverse representation on the decision-making body level. And then this is another area where racial equity and social justice show up quite handily. And yeah, so I'd like to just flag that as an issue that we should outcomes and who's making decisions and what expected outcomes are, et cetera. I didn't make very much sense. I think that this is an issue that where our racial equity and social justice work shows up. And we need to just be aware of that discipline policy is disproportionately impacts Black and brown people in our system. And therefore we should just flag that as something that we want to be mindful of.
If that might go up a couple where it was talking about the behavioral team, which is being replaced with the reimagined discipline. If
yes,
where you're looking to make sure that there's a diverse representation on that.
Yeah. Yes, that too. I just as an example. Yeah, I think that's important to be very clear and very mindful of who's making decisions for our student body.
So I'm going to just make a note about moving the text, and Janice, I'm going to look to you to work with Michelle on where we're going to move that. Does that work? I think it's a great recommendation. I will say in this particular area, Shanice did an amazing job with family and parent engagement on this issue to inform our policy. I mean, the policy work was great. It's just, we're still waiting. We need to finish our bargaining and our conversations with PAT, but there was on the front end really deep engagement with diverse parents who had experience, their students had experience with discipline practices at PPS. Let's see, the flow charts, if you click on the links, it's the determination is no additional action needed, that is responsive to the questions and the information that was requested. So what I want to do is go back through here. We're now in the contract portions of the response. And in addition to the Secretary of State's audit, we also, just overlaying on top of everything else, we had a contracts audit as well. And what I'll want to do is incorporate the information that Danny shared today and the links so that anybody could go in and look at the link of the contract performance and click on to those. Also, this is, I believe, this is where that October 5th presentation or document with metrics should be added.
Director Edwards, I've gone ahead and shared those with you. I've sent them to both you and Kara, so you have them.
Okay. Thank you. So we've got additional responses. So on this recommendation at the bottom of page 9, we are, I believe the board is somewhat caught between the Secretary of State's request of how they would like us to do something and what the district practice is. And the district has changed the practice. So instead of saying, we're going to just do what the Secretary of State tells us to do, I'd like them to look at the information that staff has provided. And then, like I say, instead of trying to change our practices to comply with the Secretary of State's audit, our staff has already done a number of things. And I think we can ask for a recommendation on best practice given the staff response. But I don't want us adopting a whole new practice just based on their recommendation from 2 years ago, because there's been a lot of work done since then. Does that make sense?
It does. Can we just communicate that to them? Can that serve as the response?
I'm sorry, what?
Can we respond to them saying, it's been 2 years since the audit. This is what we've done. And tell them that, I don't know, we need to respond something back to them, but can we provide a little bit of pushback? Or how much pushback can we?
We can. The one
Which
other
way do
thing
we have to say this doesn't work for us?
Yes, to an extent, we probably need to look at what we said we were going to do also, and what staff said they were going to do, and just make sure that we're not saying now that we don't want to do what we said we were going to do. Does that make sense? And in light of the significant amount of work that's been done. And the contracting was primarily on personal service contracts, non-competitive contracts, and student-facing ones. So it is broader. So, for example, the contracts that Danny is referencing, those are all, the results are listed, but that's not the case for our other contracts. So we'll just need to make sure that that we're just being comprehensive in how we respond. Okay, and I think number 4, the recommendation, Danny, this will be Danny's response of the who's reviewing annually the specific metrics and outcomes. We have that, and I think I saw Roseanne sent it through. On the 150, the non-competitive contracts under 150,000. Again, this is a space where staff is in disagreement with the Secretary of State, and they were some of the contracts in which they pointed out that the board should have more oversight were for contracts under 160,000, 150,000. We made the case that the board wouldn't see those because they're under the amount. Their recommendation is the board looked at them, and we can get a recommendation of best practice given the response from the Secretary of State, and just because they recommend something, that I think it's only a recommendation. It's not something that we actually would have to do if we disagreed with it. But again, I feel like that's a space where we're caught between what the Secretary of State has recommended in their audit and what staff wants to do. Although I feel like they have offered here that they could provide some contracts if there was an interest on a less regular basis.
Is this the bucket of contracts that Danny just was talking about that get heavy scrutiny? Because
no,
these are under 150,000 and they're going to culturally specific organizations. Is it disproportionately aimed at those organizations, or is it across the board contracts under 150?
It's like everything from a DJ for a middle school dance to, the contract for the strategic plan. It's any contract in the district, any of them, like at a middle school, just school-based contracts. It's everything under 150. And the scrutiny that the ones specifically that the Secretary of State pointed out were ones that were student support contracts, and some of them were culturally specific organizations, although not most of them, because most of those are actually over 150,000. It could have.
That's what I mean. Anyway, I just want to make sure that we are equally scrutinizing contracts, and if the ones under $150,000 are to culturally specific organizations, that we are aware that we're providing this extra level of scrutiny on those contracts, maybe without other, nobody's looking at a contract to send the kids, to Vienna for violin lessons. So as long as it's equally applied, the scrutiny is equally applied, I'm happy with the recommendation.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think if you were on the board, Michelle. I think when we started getting.
I can't even remember when I started. I'm so tired.
Yeah, well, and I want to just be cognizant of the time here because we're over. We did get them, and it was just everything. It was like running a data sort for anything under 150,000. So we saw them all. Like I say, it would be the trip to Vienna and the Chess for Success, at a particular school, or the DJ, like literally there were a lot of DJs. So again, I feel like that's an area that the board is sort of caught between the staff, and I think staff has presented a, alternative that, and I'm having a hard time moving my screen here. And that must be like a sign that we probably should wrap up, but I can't. Is this the very end? No, yeah, that's the end. That's why I can't go any further. So on the last item, which was performance of contractors operating alternative schools, no further action needed on that. Because there is, we've got the documentation that shows that we've done that. At a macro level, is there any other issues people want to raise? My preference would be if we have smaller issues that, or sort of one-off issues or editing issues, that people send those to me directly.
Can you send an updated copy of this with all the edits we've done during the meeting to us?
Yes, I can do that. Roseanne, can we put this on a Google Doc that people have access to? In terms of version control or having everything in one place?
Can I figure out a way to do that that keeps in the spirit of public?
Yes.
Meetings? Yep.
That's what I'm asking you. Okay.
If
the answer, Jackson,
we'll figure something out.
The answer, Jackson, is yes. And so I'd love to get, I think at a high level, we have sort of general agreement on a point of view, and that we'll make some of these revisions and get it all sort of bundled up for to send off along with the staff document, which again, we should just be clear that like we haven't reviewed that in detail because that's a staff response versus the questions directed at the board. Before we conclude, I want to give any of the staff who've been on the call an opportunity to, if there's anything we need to add or questions you have about the next steps. Okay. Any last questions, concerns from any of the committee members? Okay, and I really appreciate this is a very dense document, but hopefully this is the last step in the process for this audit that we had from the state. And I know there's been questions about whether we should take it seriously because it's their opinion. And if you've seen the documents that they do in their final report, I think we should take it seriously and be responsive if we disagree, we can state that, but they definitely will be issuing a final report, and we want the good work that's occurred to date to show up in that final report.
Mhm.
Okay.
Thank you for making this so digestible. That spreadsheet was really difficult to read. I don't know. It's like 4 font or something once I printed it out. So this was very helpful.
Well, I've got to thank Janice for removing it from a spreadsheet to a Word document. And then again, the code coding is not ideal, but I think we should be able to have a process by which somebody could go through and, most importantly, the auditors, and see what our response is. And so thank you, everybody, for going through a rather tedious exercise, but one that we definitely needed to go through. And thank Janice on the auditing team for assisting with this as well. Okay. Thank you, everybody, and I apologize that it ran over this evening, but I think we're at a point where we can get it over the finish line without another meeting.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.